Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and today I want to have a little more fun and actually go back to what I want to do in the last episode and come up with a concept for a piece of media that I enjoy that I have learned some things from. For today, I have chosen the games Diablo 1 and 2. These are, especially the second game, some of my favorite games to play. And back in the day, I just really loved the concept of having this terrible evil that is trying to ruin the world, and it was very clear what the enemies were because you're fighting demons and you are working with angels and other groups in order to stop this from happening. That feels very close to home these days. The only thing is the threats, the enemies, so to speak, are not exactly that easy to spot. However, these are still some of my favorite games to play. I love the stories, I love the challenge, I love the combat, and here are some of the things that I have learned from playing these games, specifically the first two. First thing that I want to share is when things are dire, and oftentimes at their most dire, there are always those who are willing to help. One of the things that is common in these games is you play a character who is an outsider who is responding specifically to this threat. And the people in the first game, it's the town of Tristram. In the second game, you're actually going to 3, 4, 5 different places. And these people have just been through the ringer. In Tristram, the son of the king, I guess technically a prince, has been kidnapped. And suddenly demons are coming out of the sanctuary in the cathedral. And bad stuff is happening. People are going missing, water is turning disgusting, and people are just kind of at their wits' end. And in these stories, in the first one, you have individuals such as a warrior, as a rogue, and a wizard who are coming in order to help solve the problem. In the second game, you have a much more diverse group of people, and they travel the world trying to stop this threat. And one of the things that is important for me to remember, especially when things look dire, whether we're talking about times of conflict, like global conflicts, wars, civil wars, whether we're talking instances of bullying that take place, if we're talking about discrimination, if we are talking about some kind of physical or emotional abuse. In a lot of these cases, there are people who are willing to help. Sometimes we have to go find them. Sometimes they seek us out. In the end, though, there are always those who are willing to help. There are those who are willing to stand up for the marginalized. There are those who are willing to stand up to authoritarians, to individuals that are going for power grabs. There are people who are doing everything that they can to ensure a much better and safer society for everyone. And these people might not even be people around you. I think of this organization that's here locally that helps with human trafficking that I support. And the women, oftentimes the women, the young girls that are being rescued through this organization, they don't know me. They have never seen me. They never will see me, likely. And that doesn't mean that the financial support that I offer isn't doing something to help them. And for a lot of these young girls, this would be a very dire time. And there are those who are willing to help, such as myself, in however way that I can. The second thing, as I was thinking about these two games, is that even the mightiest will fall. The premise of the first Diablo game is you are trying to stop the Archbishop Lazarus from using the prince of, or the son of King Leoric, named Albrecht, from being used as a vessel for the demon Diablo, who is one of the three prime evils. And by the time you make it to the end, you do have to fight Lazarus. You gain access to the last level of hell where you fight Diablo. And when you take down Diablo, you have proven yourself to be a much more powerful and formidable force than even the Lord of Terror. And the soul of Diablo, the Lord of Terror, is kept within a soul stone that as soon as you defeat Diablo, you see the, I guess I was going to say the form, but it's really just the person of Albrecht, who had this soul stone just inserted into his forehead. And your character takes the soul stone and then proceeds to jam it into his forehead, and it leaves you kind of on a cliffhanger, but you end up finding out that the hero in the first game becomes the villain in the second game. He becomes the Dark Wanderer, and wherever he goes, destruction and mayhem and darkness just abounds. And he is trying to hold back the power of Diablo. In fact, when I think about it, I don't know why he even chose to do this instead of just destroying the Soul Stone. You find out later that you can't with any human means. There's some otherworldly means that have to be used to destroy these Soul Stones. But he's trying to contain essentially the essence of Diablo, the Lord of Terror, and it doesn't work. Diablo starts to take control of the hero of the first game. And he becomes the villain in the second game. The character that you play as in the second game has to bring down the new Diablo, who is the hero from the first game. And this is an example of how there are so many who are in positions of power and authority that, as much as it sucks, and they're going to do some real damage, they really are, especially these dictators. Yet even the mightiest of nations and the mightiest of people, they fall. Attila the Hun, Adolf Hitler, all of these mighty kings in Europe who enslaved many, who colonized. Every emperor of Japan and every emperor of China, they always made way for another dynasty. And in fact, you can look in a lot of stories in mythology to find that so many people, or not people, so many gods even fall. Zeus and Odin, just to name a couple. Just to name the ones that I truly do know. Even the mightiest among us fall. We're tempted. We're human. We make mistakes. The same can be said for me. Not that I'm claiming to be any kind of grand figure in history. Not even close in that regard. Yet, I have made mistakes in my past that I regret. And even if I were to take on some kind of position of authority, eventually my time would have to come to an end. That's just how this goes. We are all subject to time. We're all subject to losing these grips for power. So, considering that this is coming from a very dark and bleak game franchise, even the most powerful people, such as the prime evils in this fictionalized version of hell, though I don't think there really is a true hell. I think all forms of hell are fictional. But even these great powers, these great evils fall. And even the great heroes that bring them down, they fall too. The third thing that I want to touch on here is that the help that we receive can sometimes come from the most unusual places. I like to use one of my favorite characters in the Diablo 2 game as an example for this. When I first got Diablo, there were 5 player classes, and then they eventually released an expansion that gave you another 2, so you had 7 total characters. You could play as a barbarian, you could play as an Amazon, you could play as a paladin, as a wizard, as a necromancer, and then eventually they released the druid and the assassin. And there was one character that I was always drawn to, and that was the necromancer. This is a character with the often ill-received powers of bringing skeletons and otherworldly beings back from the dead. And the first time I played, I was a summoning necromancer. As the necromancer, you could specialize in poison and bone magic, you could specialize in curses, or you could specialize in summoning. And I always was just drawn to the summoning. In fact, I can remember making it to a sewer area in the second act of the game and having so many skeletons that I was summoning that they were legitimately getting in my way and I couldn't navigate in this more confined space. This is one of those kind of characters that a lot of people would not really seek the help of or want the help of. And yet, this character had a desire to help and to stop this great evil from taking over the land. And so this was the first character that I played. When the remaster came out, once again, it was the first character that I played. And one of the things that they ended up doing in some of the later games is you actually worked alongside some other necromancers, and instead of them being the kind of people who just dabble in this really dark and nasty magic that people don't want to have around them at all, what ended up happening instead is you found that these people were striving to maintain the balance of life and death, because you have these demons that are coming through. They're making undead, they're causing all sorts of disruption with skeletons and spirits and ghosts, and these necromancers were working to maintain that balance, to put to put these disturbed souls at peace. And I really liked that twist on this character. And in this day and age, I am reminded of this comic that I've seen a couple of times now, where you have this drawing of Jesus who is tugging on a rope, and he's pulling and pulling, and he's really struggling in this tug of war. And then an atheist comes over, grabs the rope, and starts pulling with Jesus. And Jesus kind of looks a little startled, and then you go to the next frame and you see who he is pulling against are Christian nationalists and capitalism. And I know that this is divisive, and I am going to point out again that this is not everyone. I understand not everyone who are Christian are fighting for a lot of the corruption that we're seeing in the government today. However, it has been, in my experience, there are a lot of people who say that they follow this person of grace and love and compassion, and yet they don't actually do anything that symbolizes that. They are violent, they are angry, they are judgmental, they feel and believe that they are superior to everyone else. And this is coming from someone who asked them to be meek and mild. And some of the people that... There are a lot of people that I have encountered who are not Christian, who embody these morals, this way of life, this compassion, this love, this acceptance. And we can find allies and support from some very unusual individuals and places. Whether we're talking some of the best support I have had since leaving the church has come from individuals who have also experienced some of the same adverse religious experiences that I have, who have had people in authority who have used and abused them. I have had people who are homosexual and individuals who identify as LGBTQIA+, who are some of the most loving and accepting people in my life. And all of the Christians in my life, well, not all, sorry, that's a grand overstatement. Most of the Christians in my life have oftentimes just disappeared because I'm no longer in their circles. It's as if I don't exist anymore. If you're looking for help in some of these dire times, it might come in forms that you don't expect, such as in the example of Diablo 2. There are people who are fighting against undead and fighting against demons, and there is someone who has some power over the dead who is coming in and trying to do something to help. The next thing that I want to talk about is how heroes come from all different backgrounds, and one of the things that we often see is how they use what they are trained in. It can be pretty easy, I think, for us to look at individuals who are heroic in our eyes and in our minds and see them as people who are otherworldly. They were gifted something, they were born with something, they have some kind of quality that we just don't have. Yet, as we look at these characters in these two games, they were all trained. Yes, they were all trained. but they are all trained in something different. In the first game, you have a warrior. He was trained with melee weapons. You have the rogue. She was trained with bows and arrows. And you have the wizard was trained with magic. In Diablo 2, you have a barbarian who grew up in a culture that is surrounded by strength and warriors and military prowess. And then you have the wizard who she learned how to use elemental and arcane abilities. You have the Amazon that has a culture of the women being the ones who are in charge, and they use spears and bows and javelins. And you have an assassin who is trained in traps and close quarters combat and being very fast in how she navigates the battlefield. There is also the druid who can change forms, who can control certain natural elements. You have the paladin who is capable of receiving power from some divine source and is also trained in armor and swords and shields. And then you have the necromancer who is trained in these darker magics. Every single one of these people have been trained in something that is near and dear to them. We can look at these fantastical examples and be like, well, yeah, someone who can control the elements, of course they're going to have some kind of special training and they've got some special gift. And yet, I think of the people who give of themselves at their job. I think of those who go out of their way to extend a compliment, to make someone feel loved and accepted. I think of when tax season came around this year. At the local library, there were individuals who were accountants that were offering their services to help people file their taxes. When we're talking about being heroes, in a lot of cases, we're not talking about being something that is grand or exceptional. We're talking about someone who is skilled in their craft and their trade, even in their hobbies. And they use that in order to make society better. Every person who is striving to do something and make our world a better place, they're heroic in their own right. And they don't have some kind of grand motivation. They don't have some unknown quality that we just don't have, or they have some unknown quantity of some internal drive that we do not have. They have a desire to help, and they're doing what they can with what they have. In these games, you have characters that are trained in certain things, and they're just showing up and they're using it. The warrior shows up and he's like, you know what? I'm great on the front line. I'm just going to grab a weapon and I'm going to go slay some of these demons. The wizard, hey, I spent years learning how to cast these spells. I can use this power in order to help these people. The druid, these demons are going around and they are making a mess of nature. I am going to use the abilities that I have in order for nature to fight back and to restore that order. These people are just using what they have and they're doing what they can with them. And the last thing, kind of end a little bit on a downer note here for this one, is that sometimes the greatest evils in our lives can be much closer to home than we would like to admit. I have heard horror stories of people who have had experiences where the people who are supposed to love and protect and care for them the most, such as parental figures and family, have been the embodiment of so many ills and evils in our society. My friend, Mike Chapman, the first friend of mine actually that I interviewed for a hero study, he was trafficked by his dad as a young child. That's evil. That is heinous. That shouldn't happen. If you take a look at so many people in positions of authority, especially spiritual leaders, and I'm not just talking Christians, though that is something you do see, whether we're talking Catholic or Protestant. There are abuses of power. There are people taking advantage of others. You have individuals who strive to get into these positions of authority, and as soon as they have that power, they abuse it, and they abuse people through it in order to get what they want. That's evil. And that's something I don't need to look across the ocean. I don't need to look in another country. I don't even need to look in another state here in the US. I just need to look down the road to see this happen. I just need to see all of these people talking about agendas, talking about getting rid of things that are woke, talking about removing ills from society that they have fabricated themselves. Conspiracy theorists, sociopaths, narcissists. I don't need to go far to see any of this. These evils, they're very close to home. I have been that person who has exemplified these ills. And that's something that I can still hold shame about, for the harm that I have done to others with my words and with my actions. In the first Diablo game, this evil came from a cathedral that was in the town of Tristram. It was right there in their town, from a place that was supposed to be a guiding light. It was supposed to be a place for help, a place to take care of suffering. And that's where the evil came from. Using myself as an example here, maybe these evils, maybe they're even coming from within. I have definitely had pride. I have definitely had my own egocentrism that has gotten in the way, that has made me an unbearable individual to others, that has made me judgmental, that has made me exhibit hatred towards individuals that are unlike me. I have been bullied, and I have been a bully. I have been judged, and I have judged others. I don't need to look more than just the person in the other side of the mirror in order to see some of the evils of this world. I'm not proud of it. It's something that I still work on. And I will be working on this until the day that I die. But when we are constantly looking elsewhere, when we're constantly looking outside in order to find what's evil in this world, it might not be as far as we think it actually is. We can find examples of this anywhere. I remember the shock that I experienced when I found out that there was human trafficking that was taking place here in this suburb that I grew up in. I thought that was something that only happened in places like Seattle and Portland, New York, Los Angeles, these large metropolitan areas. And around here, we have an event that takes place in August, sometimes August, sometimes July, where there's boat races that take place. And I found out that the weekend that these boat races take place, the demand that human trafficking meets spikes to the tune of over 100 people being trafficked a day. That shocked me when I found out about that statistic. That's horrible. That should not be happening, and that's right here in my hometown. That's why I support an organization that works to get these people out of human trafficking. I am not a Republican, and I can absolutely look at Republicans and see such evil that is being done, taking away rights from people. And I can look at Democrats and see how they are mistreating their people as well, and mistreating the opposing side. Wherever you are, there is a good chance, in fact, I would say there's pretty much 100% certainty that there are evils that are within your sphere of influence. And they may be influencing you. And there are things that you can do about them. We don't need, in fact, we oftentimes shouldn't look out towards others to find evils. We should look at those much closer to us in order to find them. I hope this has been insightful. And I do just want to remind you, if you have any questions, then you can send me questions. You can send me ideas for people that we can interview or research for hero studies at questions.btcpod@gmail.com. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a review on iTunes, on Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like and leave a comment. I would love to engage with you however I can. And until next time, live strong for today.